الله أكبر حي على الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر حي على الصلاة الله أكبر. Islam Morse, please be seated. الله أكبر حي على الصلاة. Arise, and all praise to Allah, the Father of the universe, cherisher and sustainer of all the boundless universes. We extend the highest of honor to His Holy Divine Prophet, Prophet Noble Drew Ali, the founder of the Moorish Science Temple of America. We extend high honors as well to its forerunner, the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, the founder of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, who did indeed warn and stir up the nations. I extend high honors to the Moorish flag, the red flag with the green 5-pointed star in the center, the 5 points representing love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. These are the 5 highest principles known to man. I extend high honors as well to the American flag, also known as the Stars and Stripes. This flag exists as a constant reminder that the European nations owe you, the Moors, with compound interest. I extend high honors as well to the noble Sheik staff, the noble Vanguard staff and keeping peace, and giving honors to you, the Eels and Bays, and my Asiatic brothers and sisters, because without you, there is no Moorish movement. Islam?
Islam.
How's everyone on the holy night?
All
All is well.
Praise Allah. I'd like to begin by addressing a topic that throughout the Islamic world is a bit touchy. You have a situation where your kindred, this is indeed what they are, and I can get to that if need be. Your kindred, the Arabs, would have you believe that you are separate from the practice and customs and traditions of that which is known as Islam. They will have you think that, Islam is their birthright. They will have you think that everything relative to Islam was their doing. So when you look up the history of the Moors, Prophet Noble Drew Ali, he asked what we refer to as the question of the ages. He asked us, what is your nationality? And with all the advancements we've made and all the studies that we've done, right? If you corner a brother and ask, well, what is your nationality? You get a lot of hesitation. But when you go amongst the nations of the earth and you ask them, what is your nationality? They give you an immediate answer. And if questioned and asked upon what basis they stand, they can give you 600,000 years worth of history to support said nationality. Islam, all right. However, when it gets to it comes to my people, right? You can have everything else, but you can't have a nationality. You can't have a nationality because nationality infers birthright. Nationality and birthright are inexplicably linked. You cannot separate the two, right? But if you take and Google Moor or Moorish, right? In the definitions, immediate words that start to come up are the word Arab, right? The word Arab they tell you there's a people, right? But when you research who the Arabs are, or in the etymology of that word, the root meanings of that word, right? You'll find that in the language, this is the same word that we use for car or vehicle, because it comes from the root word araba, which means that which moves from place to place. Okay, so it's describing an act, not a people, right? But ever since our empire, our Moorish empire, was dismantled, ones began to grab, it's like a power grab, right? Created a power vacuum. And ones began to step in and supplant themselves in our place, right? It's not news. It happened in ancient times. It happened with Israel. There's a group of people that call themselves Jews today, right? Who have supplanted our forefathers. When if you look at the hieroglyphs that are left of the ancient Israelites, you'll see people that look like yourselves. It happened with those called the Chaldeans, right? Or Chaldeans in the areas of Iraq and Mesopotamia and so on and so forth, right? The people that are there who are the mixed breed inhabitants, all right, of that land are usurping your birthright, because if you look at the hieroglyphs, you'll see people that look like yourselves. Islam? So what I like to do is, on the Prophet's nationality card, he returns to the Moorish Americans, upon proclamation of your nationality and joining the Moorish Science Temple of America. There's a very specific wording on the card, very specific symbols or emblems on the card, right? But one specific line on there says, I do hereby declare that you are a Muslim under the divine laws of the Holy Quran of Mecca, love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Islam?
Islam.
Now he's very specific. He didn't say, I do hereby declare that you are Muslim under the laws of the Holy Quran of Mecca. He didn't say that. He said, under the divine laws of the Holy Quran of Mecca.
Right.
Islam?
Islam.
Prophet Noble Drew Ali, when you research his entire body of work, right? And this is something that most don't do, because first, most of our people don't know who Prophet Noble Drew Ali is, right? Just like many of us have heard the name Marcus Mosiah Garvey, Marcus Garvey, but have you really studied Garvey? Because there's no way you can study Garvey without at the end coming out with, I need a nationality. It's impossible, right? There's no way you can study Garvey and at the end of that still stay black. There's no way, because his organization was called the Universal Negro Improvement Association. So he, even though it wasn't his charge to bring the nationality, he was wise enough to know that the Negro needed improvement. And the word black and Negro is the same word, right? Negra from Spanish is black. Islam? Now, I do hereby declare that you are a Muslim under the divine laws of the Holy Quran of Mecca. So why would he say this? Because when you study the Holy Quran of Mecca, has anyone ever read the Quran of Mecca or the Holy Quran? Okay. Can you separate in there, my brother, the difference between Arab custom, and I'm not picking up, it was just convenient, put your hand up, between Arab custom and divine law? Allow me to give you an example. There's an ayat in there that says, roughly alluding to, if any of you catches your wives in lewdness, right? Everybody know the word lewdness, right? Catches your wives in lewdness, you're to, and you have 4 witnesses to testify to the account of that, you can lock her up in a form of house arrest for the rest of her days. Now, is that a divine law or is that a custom?
That's a custom.
That's a custom. There's a verse that Muslims don't like to speak on, but it's in the book, where it talks about wives, again, and it talks about if you disagree with her, you can beat her lightly. Use the word daraba in Arabic, which means to strike or to hit. Now, is that a divine law or is that a custom?
A custom.
That's a custom. Islam? Now, let me give you Prophet Noble Drew Ali. This is why you need your prophet, right? Because prophets come to bring you a new, anybody know the word dispensation? Right? The word dispensation represents an era of time. Okay? The Prophet Muhammad's teachings represented an era of time. Right? So the people he came to, his own kindred, who by the way knew their nationality. Right? The people he came to knew they were Arabs. That was the problem. The problem was they had fallen away from the straight and median path that Allah had designed, or basically got away from their own divine creed and started worshiping other things. Okay? So Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, came to them to straighten them out in certain areas. Right? The Prophet Noble Drew Ali comes to bring us a new dispensation of time. Right? Now, the books of creed that we've had, right, in this country, it was primarily one book, obviously the Bible, right? Most of us are familiar with the Bible. Even if you haven't read it diligently, you're familiar with it. So if you hear Adam and Eve, you've heard these names. Noah, Abraham, you've heard these names, you're familiar. Jesus, definitely, right? But most of it hasn't actually studied it, much less in the language in which it was revealed, okay? So as a result, when you bring it over into English, there's a lot of propaganda games that are played, right? Anyone knows anyone that speaks another language?
No, we won't.
Okay, yes. Have you heard them say a phrase or word in the language, right? And then when you ask them, what does that mean? What do they do? Oh, well, you know, kind of mean, and it kind of means, because what they're attempting is to give you a translation, because all ideas don't translate over. Right? Because the language is based on the cultural experience of the people. Islam, if you don't share the same cultural experience, especially East to West, right? There's a lot of things that our forefathers understood, right? That the Western world, primarily the European world, right, has no idea of, right? And a lot of West African nations, and a lot of tribal dialects, there's no word for, there's no distinction between, how can I say it again? How do I say it? Between living person and ancestor per se. You know, because it just, the way the words come, you know, are understood in the language, they're a continuation of the same thing. You see? See, like here when somebody dies, they're dead. right? And you remember you pull out pictures, you may shed a little tears, right? But you don't, you're not taught to see their presence as with you at present, right? So there's a whole thing about translating ideas that's lost when we deal with these books of creed, right? The Moorish Science Temple of America, founded in 1913, obviously by Prophet Noble Drew Ali, began to publish its own newspaper in the year of 1928, right? Every Friday, from 1928 to 29, it was only 1 year, but every Friday a new publication came out of the Moorish God. And in that newspaper, there were grand sheiks and grand sheikesses from all over the country who submitted articles and research and all different types of stuff. And many times the Prophet himself would put various different articles in there. But this is one article, and I'm drawing from the book one of our grand sheiks wrote up in Philadelphia, Brother A. Hopkins Bey, Brother Azim Hopkins Bey, may peace be upon our brother. Honors to our brother, I say. Prophet Noble Drew Ali, Savior of Humanity. This is the book. You can get it on Amazon's Word and Study. All right? But this article that he's quoting from the Prophet Noble Drew Ali out of the Moorish God newspaper is entitled Masterpiece of Religious Literature, Secrets of Other Creeds Revealed. The Prophet says, the Prophet Noble Drew Ali has spent many hours preparing the latest edition of the Quran, which will be a masterpiece of religious literature. To Americanize the Oriental idea of Islam involves many changes that are more or less negative to the main purpose of the Islamic religion. Such changes are carefully considered with the idea to avoid changing the complexion of the original text. The philosophy of the ancient prophets is the main initiative in the compilation of the Quran. No thoughts of propaganda enter this work, as has been the case of many former religious works, such as the Bible and other books of creed. Let me pause right there. The Prophet teaches us too, he says, we're not to use any radical or agitating speech against any other organized groups. So in no way, shape, or form is this to be misunderstood that the Prophet is going at the Bible. That's not the case. Okay? I know we're used to other groups doing that. That's not our platform. He's just pointing out a particular point. He says, the sole purpose of the Prophet in giving such a message to the world is to save fallen humanity. When a compiler attempts to inject propaganda into a work of this kind, there arises a need to cover the true text in order to prevent a clash with the truth and ideas involved in such propaganda. Former works of this kind have either hindered or helped the nations proportionately to the adherence to the truth as to the original purpose of keeping the ignorant in such esteem. It is hard to resist the temptation to use this medium for gain. Hence, many of the former treaties on works of this kind have been the means to use religious influence for gain. The many secrets known to the Prophet that could be used for the salvation of the nation were either left out or colored to an extent that their meaning was made void. Such is not the case with this edition of the Quran. All the secrets of the ages known to man are put into this work. The secrets known only to the Magi are here revealed. The reading of the stars, the interpretation of marriage relations, the understanding of the span of life, and other such has been kept from the oxes in the world, are in this book boldly brought out. The Quran, Americanized as it will be, can be bought in a few weeks. Islam, Morris?
Islam.
Now, to Americanize the Oriental ideal of Islam. Oriental, when you research it, does not mean Chinese. It does not mean Japanese. It means Eastern. 180 degrees from Oriental is Occidental. That's Western, right? Now, what is the need to Americanize the Oriental or the Eastern idea of Islam? Because whether you like it or not, right, and due to the history of our people in this country, and due to the treatment we've received under this particular flag, right, we don't like to look at ourselves like Americans like that. True?
True.
Tell the truth and shame the devil. Right? We don't see ourselves as Americans like that. Anybody ever traveled outside the country? Where'd you go, sister?
Jamaica.
Praise Allah. Still in the West? It's Western Hemisphere? Okay. Anyone else? Anyone travel to the East? Overseas? My brother, where have you?
Wrong. Marrakesh.
Marrakesh. Ah, beautiful. Okay. An interesting thing about it is when I've been to Saudi Arabia, 3 cities. When you're overseas, you begin to realize, though, if you don't speak, you've probably know this experience. If you don't speak, they might not know you're not from there. Okay. However, there's a thing inside of you that lets you know you're not from there. right? Don't get me wrong, we're an adaptable people. We can adapt wherever we go, right? But there's certain things, in relative to how we were raised, certain sensibilities, certain creature comforts that we're used to in America that may not be. When I was in Saudi Arabia, I couldn't find a toilet nowhere in Mecca. I was there for 23 days. It was rough. I was there for 2 weeks in Mecca and Medina, the remainder. And out in Medina, they had toilets. Praise Allah. So, used to a toilet, right? I know that sounds carnal, but what I'm saying is there's certain things that, you're influenced by by virtue of the fact that you're from here, right? Now, instead of struggling against that reality, the Prophet Noble Drew Ali faced that reality and said, okay, you honor your forefathers and your foremothers that your days be longer upon the earth land that the great God Allah has given you, right? That's the covenant, right? However, the forefathers that we look at in the East, we have forefathers here that bled, fought, built, suffered, died, thrived, all of that right here, I asked some brother I knew was an African priest, or a specific African tradition, West African tradition. And, I would, attend, had the honor of attending some of their celebrations and ceremonies. And I know there's various different, shrines set up, right? And the shrines that they set up were in the names of ancestors from another particular country in West Africa. So when I had the opportunity, I asked the priest, I said, well, can we honor, it's beautiful that we honor the forefathers there, because we have a connection there, right? But can we honor the ones that were here and died? Because don't we have a more immediate access to that energy, right? Like how powerful is it if you was to summon the vibration of your grandmother who may have transitioned, or a great grandmother, and that because your blood is vibrating along those lines, and blood and spirit does have a connection. Islam, all right? But the point is, you got to honor the things that molded you into what you were here, right? And contrary to popular belief, if you really do the real search about here, right? This ain't what the Europeans told you it was.
True.
Right? And you can see that you had an influence in this hemisphere over 50,000 years, well established. The Constitution that most of our people don't read, but we call ourselves citizens, right? That Constitution was established by way of a Constitution that was already here before the Europeans got here. Islam? All right? But again, hate blinds, right? So we so angry at what happened, we don't realize you're giving up your own birthright, right? But back to that, I do hereby declare, right? So the Prophet Noble Drew Ali was telling you that the Holy Quran of the Moorish Science Temple of America will be that book that he used the term compiled. That he compiled this text, right? Meaning that he pulled it from different sources, right? Well, we've had ones that attack the Moorish position and say that, well, isn't that plagiarism? Now if I tell you that I'm compiling Islam, right? And what are the sources that he's compiling from? He's compiling from Asiatic sources, right? There are Europeans that have compiled, but made it seem like they've received that compilation from the Akashic records and from some untangible realm, right? Not that we're negating that exists, right? But when you get to researching ones like Eliphas Levi Dowling, right, who is the author of the Aquarian Gospel of Jesus Christ, right? When you really corner him, in his body of work to find out where he was getting that stuff from, right? Fez, Morocco, Cairo, Egypt, the lands that your fathers, some of your forefathers, inhabited, right? So to put together what he was trying to put out, he was still drawing from your forefathers' works, right? And Prophet Noble Drew Ali gave us, a particular text that we can compare east to west and get a proper understanding for ourselves, right? Because a lot of times when and I don't like the word convert, right? Because convert infers that you're going to something that you weren't already, right? I prefer the term revert. You're going back to yourself, right? But when you revert back to your original customs and your original laws, right? Once you have the proper understanding, right? You can speak with anybody on the planet as an equal, right? I've seen brothers that have taken what they call the Shahada, which means you bear witness, right? And become Muslim. But they have divine creed, because Islam is a divine creed. Have divine creed without nationality. So when they get in the presence of those who have a nationality and divine creed, in this case Arabs, right? They automatically defer to them. Automatically. When I was in Mecca, 92, we were invited over some very wealthy Arabs' houses. And it was a group of 11 of us that left here from the States that went. And we're sitting at the table and they're feeding us, and they gave us, the Quran I had from over there I brought with me when I came back, and a bunch of other stuff, books of hadith and different stuff. But the point is that, I'm there, I'm like, something don't feel right, because I was only 19 at the time, but I'm like, something doesn't feel right. So there's an angle here that's going to reveal itself. And lo and behold, they went around and began to ask him a question. And they asked, they said, well, this Elijah Muhammad, what do you feel about this Elijah Muhammad? Do you feel he was messenger of Allah? What do you feel? Now, ironically, all the brothers I went with were older brothers who were formerly in the Nation of Islam and then left and became Sunni Muslims. They immediately began to bash and go against Elijah Muhammad to these Arabs, which, just from an American sensibility, just from a loyalty to your own people sensibility, that's something you never do. That violates the code, even if you disagree ideologically. You stand with your people, because do you think the Arabs are going to go against each other to stand to decide with you? Do you think the Europeans are going to go against each other to decide with you? As ignorant as some of the things that President Trump does, they're going to ride with him till the wheels fall off. Islam, and I say that respectfully, right? They got around to me, and at the time I didn't have my nationality, but I had studied some of Elijah Muhammad's work. And I said, I think that Elijah Muhammad was one of the greatest black men that ever existed. Astaghfirullah, which means I seek refuge in Allah. They basically were ready to stone me at that point, But it just didn't feel right to me that you go against someone of your own kindred who did so much. Again, ideologically or not, we're not even dealing with that. We're dealing with the fact that, took brothers and sisters, cleaned them up. Brothers used to be heroin addicts, cleaned them up. Sisters used to be prostitutes, cleaned them up. All white, and not just the garment, right? But demonstrating purity from inside out, so they had the glow. All right? This is what we are, we're pushing for, for our people to get that solidarity back. But without nationality, we lack that. Negro, black, and colored, and today's African American do not give you what you need to stand with the nations of the world as equals and make and enforce law. It doesn't. You will end up on the receiving end of law enforcement instead of sitting at the table to make the laws, right? And if you're not clear about your nationality and your divine creed, you won't know from what realm you're supposed to be enacting laws from. So this is the thing with the lawmakers now, right? It's a very secular vibration, right? And believe it or not, as scienced up as we like to think we are as a people, right? Historically, there's never been a time when we had a secular nation. All of our societies were divine and national. Got a lot of brothers and sisters think they are getting away from religion by invoking Egypt or ancient Kemet. Oh, it wasn't about religion in ancient Egypt, wasn't? Interesting. The Pharaoh of Egypt was considered God incarnate. There's a book called the Pert Heru, which means the book of coming forth by day. In the Pert Heru, you have the lake of fire, the afterlife, the hall of judgment scene, right? Where they put your deeds, you put your heart on one side of the scale and the feather on the other side, and they have to balance out. Allegory, right? We're clear that it's allegory, but the point is, the same motif that exists in Islam, the same motif that exists in Christianity, the same Judaism, whatever, all these motifs have existed all throughout all Afro-Asiatic cultures since we've been on the planet, right? Don't allow our contact with the European, right, to cause you to hate your forefathers' ways. But when you don't know who you are, you throw the baby, the bathwater, the house, you throw everything out, to sign up for what they're demonstrating, right? But if what they're demonstrating had a saving power, we wouldn't be in the condition that we're in, right? On our divine constitution and bylaws, which is the laws of God and more science simple of America, Noble Raleigh demonstrated symbolism, right? Because in the ancient world, the ancient masters knew that the brain don't think in letters, it thinks in images, right? To the point where you had your hieroglyphics, If you go to Northern Africa, there's a group of people called the Amazigh, what they call the Berbers. And the Amazigh have their own language. And in their language, it's the glyphs are almost like a hieroglyphic type of glyph. And that language didn't come from, another language. It's been there, all right? But if you look at the top of the Divine Constitution and Bylaws, right, You had, Brother Jabari, take that down for me. Thank you. Just hold it so I don't think the people on this side can see. It says, salvation, Allah, unity. As we clearly can see, salvation demonstrated the start of pressing. For Allah, He has what's known now as the all-seeing eye, right? And unity, we don't shake hands, we press hands, hand press of unity, right? But the point is that each one of these emblems can be found universally throughout all cultures and all lands, all right? Thank you, right? The concept of salvation, right? We hear salvation, we think Christianity, right? There's a book entitled Stolen Legacy by George G.M. James. For those that don't have it again, get it, it's a worthy study. And again, I'm giving you references because I don't want you to believe anything I'm saying. This is a thought movement. We are trying to, influence our people to think and to research, right? And you should not necessarily allow someone to come in front of you and demonstrate without displaying evidence of their claims. We've done that for far too long, right? On page 88 of this text, Stolen Legacy is referred to as the salvation of the soul. And this is coming from ancient Egyptian, philosophy. It says the purpose of philosophy is the salvation of the soul, whereby it feeds upon the truth congenial to its divine nature, and thus escapes from the wheel of rebirth, and finally attains the consummation of unity with God. Unity with God. Right? Because again, Europeanized thought has separated divinity from us. Right? Even the Arabs have a teaching. They teach this even though it's not in the Quran. Right? They teach that Allah is in heaven. That's a lie. Point anywhere and show me where anywhere Allah is not. Islam?
Islam.
We have a teaching that says Allah is ought, as Sister Sajid demonstrated. If Allah is ought, which is an antiquated word which means all, that means all things are Allah. Islam? Right? And even Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that, Allah is closer to you than your own jugular vein. That's right here. Islam?
Islam.
It's pretty close. It says, the body is the tomb of the soul. The aspirations of the soul. There is a realm of true reality which is above the world of sense. Right? The prophet says, exercise your 5 senses when you are able to do so. Why would he say that? Because sense perception in this realm can be overwhelming at times. We judge things by what they seem to be, not what they are, which is truth in reverse. Because you're supposed to judge things by what they are, not what they seem to be. Right? But how often are our eyes able to distinguish truth from error? Not very often. Islam? You ever seen those paintings where they're like an illusion, like you think you're looking at one thing, you stare along and it becomes something else? Because your eyes really can't tell the difference. But we put so much faith in what our eyes see. And that's how the European became your God. Because he dazzled you by what you saw. Right? Instead of you looking at the essence of what that thing really was. Right? It says the doctrine of self-knowledge, know thyself. Right? And it uses a phrase in this book that's in our Quran, the More Science Temple from America, which is Sultan Gnath, which is a Latin term, which means know thyself. Which we're clear on top of all the ancient temples, right? In Egypt, it said know thyself. Right? And even the concept of Moorish Science Temple, where the prophet arranged that, Moorish defines the man or the woman. Right? Science means to seek or to know. Right? Temple is yourself. So Moorish Science Temple is man, know thyself. Islam? Right? It says, self-knowledge is the basis of true knowledge. The mysteries required as a first step the mastery of the passions, which made room for the occupation of unlimited powers. Hence, as a second step, the neophyte or the initiate, because in our ancient ways of thought, we had to be initiated into a particular school of thought, and you advanced in degrees, right? Another group of people, usurped that, and now they call themselves Freemasons, right? Respect to those who may be or may not be, right? But the point is that originally started with us, but we didn't call it that. Islam? Right? And it says, hence as a second step, the neophyte was required to search within himself for the new powers which he had taken possession of him. The Egyptians consequently wrote on their temples, man, know thyself. I just like to draw from another portion in the same book, page 39, which says how the African continent gave its culture to the Western world. It says, as mentioned elsewhere, the Egyptian mysteries and the philosophical schools of Greece were closed by the edicts of Theodosius in the 4th century AD and that of Justinian in the 6th century AD. And as a consequence, intellectual darkness spread over Christian Europe and the Greco-Roman world for 10 centuries, 1,000 years, during which time knowledge had disappeared. As stated elsewhere, the Greeks showed no creative powers and were unable to improve upon the knowledge which they had received from the Egyptians. During the Persian, Greek, and Roman invasions, large numbers of Egyptians fled not only to the desert and mountain regions, but also to lands adjacent in Africa, Arabia, and Asia Minor, where they lived and secretly developed the teachings which belonged to their mystery system, right? So all of that was before the 8th century AD, so that was before the time of the Prophet Muhammad. But the Egyptian teachings had fled to the land that we call Arabia and began to unfold itself already in that land, which is why on Prophet Muhammad's first revelation, he was in a cave meditating, right? And you don't hear Muslims in the Islamic world talk about meditation like the sister talked about mantras, like the Sheik talked about dhikr. Dhikr and mantra is the same word. That's Arabic, that comes out of Sanskrit. Same ideal, right? Repetitive utterances to reset the mind's focus. Islam? Right? So it says, in the 8th century AD, the Moors, i.e. natives of Mauritania and northern Africa, invaded Spain and took with them the Egyptian culture which they had preserved. Knowledge in these areas, knowledge in the ancient days was centralized, i.e. it belonged to a common parent and system, the wisdom, teaching, or mysteries of Egypt, which the Greeks used to call Sophia. As such, the people of North Africa were the neighbors of the Egyptians and became the custodians of Egyptian culture, which they spread through considerable portions of Africa, Asia Minor, and Europe. During their occupation of Spain, the Moors displayed with considerable credit the grandeur of African culture and civilization. The schools and libraries which they established became famous throughout the medieval world. Science and learning were cultivated and taught. The schools of Cordova, Toledo, Seville, Saragossa attained such celebrity that, like their parent Egypt, attracted students from all parts of the Western world, and from them arose the most famous African professors that the world has ever known in medicine, surgery, astronomy, and mathematics, meaning that the world was sending their children to your lands to study. Okay? Why this fez headdress is recognized all over the world is because it was the uniform of those who studied at the University of El Karawayim in Marrakesh, a place where our brother has put his foot, right? In that university, also known as, the University of Fez, right? It was first of all, something not, commonly taught. That university was established by a sister named Fatima al-Fikri, right? Who was looking at, the condition of the intellect of the people of that land, said they need a university here, right? And the University of Fez, as it's colloquially called, is that and the University of Azhar in Egypt are the two oldest universities on earth right now. It's not Oxford, it's not Harvard, it's not Cambridge, right? It's two universities in Northern Africa. It's the oldest. The European knows that, but he's not going to teach you that because that would empower you. Islam, right? Islam, what?
So when they were speaking of the Egyptians that had already gone in the 8th century?
Yes.
The 8th century?
Yes.
So this is the same process that happened in chapter 47?
Exactly. Well, yeah, same process, different time period.
Okay, so this is later on.
This is
chapter
later.
47 is earlier.
This is more contemporary. This is closer to our time period.
All right.
And because again, right, so if I go to the map, right, so Caucasus Mountain region, right? So, and this is for the benefit of everyone. As these Europeans, as we know, we isolate, this was like a penal colony. Those who couldn't, obey our laws, we pushed them up into those mountains, right? Time began to happen, and they began to come out of the mountain region and invade the areas of Syria, of Iran, Iraq. These are all right here. Turkey, so on and so forth, would come down.
This is the time of February?
That's the more ancient times.
Okay, before then, okay.
Islam. That's so during that, you'd be going back about 6-7 years,
Okay.
6,000 years. Excuse me. All right. During the time the book is referencing, this is going, maybe like right after the AD period. So we're going from 1 AD, between 1 AD and about 7th century, somewhere around there. All right. Because what happens is there's successive waves of them that kept coming out through different times. All right. So as they came out, coming to the lands, rape, pillage, rob, so on and so forth. So various different laws, and like the Quran of Mecca, when you look at it, it's a law book to deal with things that were going on at that time, right? Just like Torah was revealed for things that were going on at that time, right? The books of Leviticus chapter 13 and 14, or Wayikra, as they say in Hebrew, deal with the curse of leprosy, right? Because that's something that was going on at that time, right? And when you read it out, they were dealing with something they do in hospitals now, they call quarantine, right? They take, quarantine, you pull you out, check, see if it's even or not. Nah, he's still active, put it back. You see what I'm saying? Right? But each scripture is, revealed to reveal laws for the people at that time to organize themselves in a divine fashion against things, or like the Quran of Mecca will call Awliya Shaitan, which means the friends of Shaitan, or friends of Satan, or the governors of Satan, the ones that protect, the carnal way. Right? Because you have to remember, they're ones that they give their lives to support that. Right? And if you don't think that's real, they got our brothers wearing dresses.
Right.
I'm just saying. They got our brothers and sisters popping pills and all out of their minds. And they're ours. We love them. But this is the condition, right?
Right.
So we got to come with a divine law to help to reorganize ourselves, to remind them that there's something greater. They're from a higher vibrating plane of spirit, and they're not defined by what takes place down the heart. Right? So this is, again, the reason why the prophet was bringing that divine creed and nationality. Let me just finish this real quick. Yes?
So Egypt was a what's it called, a powerhouse for a very, very long time.
Very long time.
Yes.
Very long
For
time.
extremely long time, like a couple ice ages.
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely a couple of
All right,
ages.
that's
You also have, a period of time where a couple schools of thought. So you remember the prophet talks about, Atlantis,
right.
right? He talks about the sinking of Atlantis, which gave birth to what we as North Americans refer to as the Atlantic Islands, which the European calls the Caribbean.
Right.
We don't use that word because the word Carib means cannibal. We don't use that word. That's propaganda, right? Right? So you had that, again, dispensation of time. It is said that when that sunk, the masters from there went and set up in different portions of the earth, right? The schools that you see in Kemet, so on and so forth, where there's two waves happening. There's ones that came in from this land period, and with this land mass here, and came into Egypt and went westward instead of that way. The prophet tells us about that.
Right.
History tells us about other ones that were in the basis of around which have like Lake Victoria and all of that, and came up and went up the Nile and set up civilizations, the Nilotic civilizations that you have down here in Sudan and so on and so forth. Which, by the way, there's more pyramids in Sudan than there is in Egypt, right? But the point is that depending on what was going on, people were trying to basically survive cataclysms. You know what I mean? Because again, we're on Earth as things are happening. So you got to account for the migratory patterns that are taking place as well, which is why you can find your genes all over the planet. Just blowing the European's mind. He goes down to Easter Island, right? And when he got there, he saw people that looked like us, right? Columbus says in his chronicles that when he got to Hispaniola, right, Dominican Republic and all that now, when he got there, he saw people that looked like the Moors he just left in Spain, dressed the same and everything, right? Not only that when he got to Cuba, he listened, and there was a mountain, and on top of that mountain was a masjid, and the call to prayer was going off in Cuba in around the year like 1500s, right? Meaning that, again, we had already been here, right? But the point is that we have gone all over the planet, so evidence of our existence is all over, right? And we take our culture with us wherever we go, right? And it may unfold itself different based on where we are on the planet. So in other words, when the original ones of Arabia, the original Arabian nationals, when them and the Israelite brothers from back in the day, the ancient Hebrews, when they stopped living around each other and parted ways, we began to pronounce words different, right? So some might say, Assalamu alaikum. Others might say, Shalom alaikum. Root word of both words, Shalom, Salam, is peace. Right? Brothers, right? If you trace the language out, trace the cultures out, trace the foods out, you see what I'm saying? Trace that which we deem to be sacred out, you'll find that we're all doing the same thing, right? If you went to Abyssinia today, which they call Ethiopia, if you go there, you'll find Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, right, all existing simultaneously without beef, right? And if you put them all together in one room, you wouldn't be able to distinguish by looking at them which one is which. Dietary patterns are the same. They get together in their dhikr circles, their mantra circles, right? And then, like the Ethiopian Orthodox, right? Which in Egypt they call it Coptic now. They'll do their chants, which sound just like the Arabic chants, only thing, they're saying Isa, right? Instead of Allah. Even though they have the word Allah in their language, because Allah is just another Afro-Asiatic term for the Most High, right? So Christians that are Arabic speaking say Allah to them, right? But we lose this in America because, again, most of us only speak one language and speak it poorly. Whereas you talk to our brothers and sisters that are from around the world, they're wielding 7 to 10 languages. Even though some of them are border language, don't let them pour that trick on you either. Some of them are border languages, which means they're dialectical. That's like, you speaking, English that we have here and the patois from Jamaica. It's still English, but it's a bit, you see what I'm saying? All right, so some of that is that. But others of it is them speaking French and Mandarin, and some of it's that. All right? So the point is, again, we've gotten far away from, right, but their nationality gives them that. Because nationality teaches you commerce and trade. And in order to engage in that commerce and trade at the level that you need to, right, you need to learn these languages. So you need to learn the customs of what offends and what doesn't. It's called diplomacy. Islam? All right? So the Prophet Noble Ali, in all of his teachings, was, trying to get us to become diplomats. Right? So, we have a tendency to want to be right no matter what. This is what leads to the debates in our community. Debating back and forth. And would destroy anything to be right. The Prophet talks about the higher self. Right? He teaches, how many selves do you have? He says there are 2. He says, name them, higher and lower self. Right? He says, the lower self is, represents, breeds hatred, slander, lewdness, murder, theft, and everything that harms. So the higher self is the mother of all virtues and the harmonies of life, breeding justice, mercy, love, and right. And that mother is that she that you were talking about, relative to the Most High, that exists for us too. So when we say Allah, that's not just masculine. Islam, right? But the point is that that higher self aspect, right, is what we've always strove to build our societies on. We have to get back to that point, and if we lose that, then we lose everything, right? So in the Quran of Mecca, what are the divine laws? The divine laws are the universal laws. The divine laws are those that if you picked up a Quran of Mecca, and you picked up a Bhagavad Gita, you picked up a Rig Veda, and you looked at the Ifa corpus, right? And whatever you looked at, all these various different, seemingly different scriptures, pick up the Torah, right? Or any of these, the books of the prophets or whatever, and lay them next to each other, you're going to find a golden thread that runs through each one of them, right? Certain ones that, the stressing of the importance of character, balanced character, right? Or to rape is wrong, or to steal is wrong, or the ones that do these things should be, rounded up and gotten out of the community where they can affect others with that. Those that accept that teaching. Islam? These are the divine laws, not the customary things that I spoke on earlier. Those customary things have nothing to do with us. That was for what was going on then. My wife just read to me a story in Egypt. It's a contemporary story happened maybe a week ago, 2 weeks ago. A guy buried his daughter alive because he didn't want a daughter. Now, if you know Arab history, right, during a period what they call Jahiliyyah in Arabic, which means ignorance, right, or the period of ignorance, when men back in the days pre-Prophet Muhammad didn't want daughters, they wanted sons, they would bury their daughters alive. So they're reverting back to what they used to be. You see? Because what happens is the further you get away from the dispensation of the prophet that came to you, right, the further you get away from the truth that he brought. You see? See, the Arabs today don't follow, the Quran of Mecca per se. They've authored a whole nother text of customary law called hadith, right? Like I said, these are hadith. Now you can flip through, I think this is a 4-volume set that I have, the Riyadh al-Salihin. But when you flip through it, nowhere in any of these hadith does it start off like the Quran, or each chapter in the Quran of Mecca, with the exception of one, starts off in the name of Allah, the Beneficent and Merciful. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Right? With the exception of one chapter, which is Surah 9, which deals with warfare, stuff like that. Right? But nowhere in there would you see them start with the name of Allah. These are the opinions of men. Okay? So when we started listening to the opinions of men instead of the divine guidance from the Most High, right? And we know that because it bears witness to itself. Right? No prophet comes and says something that's contradictory to the prophet that came before him. All of them come to fulfill that which came from the one before us. So when, Noble Drew Ali says, we honor all true and divine prophets, Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, and Confucius, right? Him being the prophet for this day and time honored the one that came before him, which was Prophet Muhammad. Prophet Muhammad honored Jesus. Jesus honored the ones that came before him. Islam? Right? And with that, so it's not burden of more. I just want to read from chapter 48, Holy Quran and More Science Temple of America. Verse 1 starts off with that concept of dispensation. Right? And for non-Roman readers, that is XLVIII. It's the last chapter in the Holy Quran. Holy Quran in more science. You hear you say Islam.
Islam.
Praise Allah. The end of time and the fulfilling of prophecies. Instruction 1. The last prophet in these days, not the last prophet, the last prophet in these days is Noble Drew Ali, who was prepared divinely in due time. When you get a chance, look up due time, Google due time and see what that means. Prepared divinely in due time by Allah to redeem men from their sinful ways and to warn them of the great wrath which is sure to come upon the earth. John the Baptist was the forerunner of Jesus in those days, to warn and stir up the nation, and prepare them to receive the divine creed which was to be taught by Jesus. In these modern days, there came a forerunner who was divinely prepared by the great God Allah, and his name was Marcus Garvey, who did teach and warn the nations of the earth to prepare to meet the coming prophet, who was to bring the true and divine creed of Islam, and his name is Noble Drew Ali, who was prepared and sent to this earth by Allah to teach the old-time religion and the everlasting gospel to the sons of men. That every nation shall and must worship under their own vine and fig tree, and return to their own and be at one with their Father God Allah. The Moorish Science Temple of America is a lawfully chartered and incorporated organization. Any subordinate temple that desires to receive a charter, the Prophet has them to issue to every state throughout the United States, etc. That the world may hear and know the truth, that among the descendants of Africa, there is still much wisdom to be learned in these days for the redemption of the sons of men under love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. We as a clean and pure nation, descended from the inhabitants of Africa, do not desire to amalgamate or marry into the families of the pale-skinned nations of Europe, neither serve the gods of their religion, because our forefathers are the true and divine founders of the first religious creed for the redemption and salvation of mankind on earth. Islam, Morris?
Islam.
Let me read that verse again, because the prophet didn't split hairs. He didn't mince words with that. He stated his position that we ain't with it.
Exactly.
Right?
That's right.
If you think the prophet was with it, let me read it again. We as a clean and pure nation, descended from the inhabitants of Africa, do not desire, we don't care nothing about it, to amalgamate or marry into the families of the pale-skinned nations of Europe, neither serve the gods of their religion, because our forefathers are the true and divine founders of the first religious creed for the redemption and salvation of mankind on earth. Islam?
Islam.
Therefore, we are returning the church and Christianity back to the European nations as it was prepared by their forefathers for their earthly salvation, while we, the Moorish Americans, are returning to Islam, which was founded by our forefathers for our earthly and divine salvation. The covenant of the great God Allah. Honor thy father and thy mother, that their days may be longer upon the earth land, which the Lord thy God hath given thee. And this is where he invites you all. This is for all our visitors. The prophet's inviting us all. It says, come all ye Asiatics of America, and hear the truth about your nationality and your birthrights, because you're not Negroes. Learn of your forefathers' ancient and divine creed, that you will learn to love instead of hate. We are trying to uplift fallen humanity. Come and link yourselves with the families of nations. We honor all the true and divine prophets. Surely Allah speaks the truth through his holy and divine prophet, Noble Drew Ali. Islam?
Islam.
All right? And just so we can, square that verse of we are returning to Islam, I just have a few verses. And I open the floor for questions. If not, I'll lower the meeting. In chapter 10, starting at verse 13, it says, this is the Allah that we're talking about. This is not the Allah that you see on CNN when they talk about Afghanistan or Iraq. Right? This is the Allah that the Prophet Noble Drew Ali taught us about. Right? And this is the Allah that our Moorish forefathers taught about. Right? Verse 13, 10:13. All people worship Allah the one, but all the people see him not alike. The universal Allah is wisdom, will, and love. All men see not the triune Allah. So that triune Allah, wisdom, will, and love, it says all men don't even see that. Right? It says one sees him as the Allah of might, another as the Allah of thought, another as the Allah of love. A man's ideal is his God. And so as man unfolds, his God unfolds. Man's God today, tomorrow is not God. The nations of the earth see Allah from different points of view. and so he does not seem the same to everyone. Man names the part of Allah he sees, and this to him is all of Allah. And every nation sees a part of Allah, and every nation has a name for Allah. Means every nation has a divine creed, so that's not a divine creed. You Brahmins call him Para-Brahman, and in Egypt he is Thoth, and Zeus is his Greek name. Jehovah is his Hebrew name, Yahweh. But everywhere he is the causeless cause and the rootless root from which all things are grown. So if you're talking about the supreme source of all existence, we're talking about the same Allah, despite who you call it. Right? So the prophet is, inviting us all to join the Moorish Science Temple of America. He didn't ask you to stop your customs. He didn't ask them. Right? If it is your custom to set up an altar for your ancestors, you set that altar up and keep it clean. You worship at your altar. Right? If your custom is you make your 5 salats daily, you make your 5 salats. Right? If your custom is to chant your mantras, you get in your lotus position with your mudras, however you want to do it, continue to do it. All that we ask, we come together and form one mind. Islam?
Islam.
Because contrary to popular belief, again, as the chairman elucidated, your enemy cares nothing about your customs. Right? Unlike other nationalities, you cannot take your uniform off. Right? So if I take my fez off, I'm out, holy vestment off, right? Put on jeans or a t-shirt, whatever, I'm still wearing my uniform. This olive hue, this melanin is my uniform. That should tell which side I'm on. But we've gotten confused as to which side we're on. So our allegiance, that's the thing about nationality. Nationality also infers political allegiance.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So who are you loyal to? Right? Prophet gives us, in your own time, when you get a chance, as the chairman said, you can look up the Holy Quran, the Moorish Science Temple of America, Google it, pull up the PDF, and research chapter 25. That's what we refer to as our Holy Covenant, the Holy Covenant of the Asiatic nation. And there's one powerful verse in there that says, prefer not a stranger before thine own blood. Right? In the time of the Prophet Muhammad didn't receive the whole Quran of Mecca at once.
That's right.
He received it over a period of 22 years. He might get a couple verses here. He might get 20 verses here. And every time he received the verse afterwards, he would have like these tremors. Right? But there were some people that were elders when he received his first couple verses. And during that remainder of their life, all they had was those 2 verses to hold on to. But they mastered those 2 verses. I tell ones, it's cool if you can, memorize everything the prophet brought, or any prophet brought. That's beautiful, right? But the greater reality is if you can grab some of the essences of their teachings, some of the more core foundational teachings, master that and live it.
Yes.
So if you grab from Noble Drew Ali, first 2 things you learn to love instead of hate, and be yourself and no one else. If you can master those 2 things, everything else will be granted unto you.
Islam.
Islam? Are there any questions, comments, concerns, or statements from anyone? No? With that, I would lower the meeting. Islam Moors? Moorish Science Temple of America, Noble Drew Ali, founder, home office, Chicago, Illinois, March 11th, 1929. A warning from the Prophet to be read in every meeting. I hereby inform all members that they must put an end to all radical and agitating speech while on their jobs, homes, or on the public streets. We advocate peace and not destruction. Stop trying out your cards with the Europeans, for it causes confusion. There has been much confusion caused by members trying out their cards. The cards are for your salvation. Failure of obeying my orders would be of severe consequence. We are for love, truth, peace, freedom, and when these principles are violated, justice must then take its course. Any member or group of members that seek to hold malicious feelings towards the temple or the prophet, or to violate the divine covenant of the Moorish movement, will receive their reward from Allah for their unjust deeds. All true Moors must obey the laws laid down to them by their prophet, and if they lose confidence in their prophet, give up your card and button, cease wearing your turban or fez, and return to the state where I, the prophet, found you. For this is a holy and divine movement founded by the prophet, Noble Drew Ali. And if the prophet is not right, the temple is not right. The prophet is sending out a divine plea to all true Moorish Americans that they may do their part in protecting the prophet and the temple. This is an everlasting movement founded by the prophet, This is an everlasting movement founded by the prophet through the will of Allah to redeem his people from their sinful ways. Peace. Noble Drew Ali. Islam?
Islam.
Islam?
Islam.
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 All praise are due to Allah and the highest of honors to his holy divine prophet, the prophet Noble Drew Ali. I want to thank you all for coming out to visit, support the temple number 19 here in Atlanta, Georgia. You could have been doing anything on a Friday night. you took time out your busy schedules to come and sit with, those of your pedigree so we can reason together, right? But see, what I like to, offer you is, that hand press of unity, right? To, when you separate into the world, right? Reflect on what was spoken of tonight, right? Reflect on the validity of it, not just in a general sense, but in your own personal lives. Reflect on the importance of what it is to have a nationality. Reflect on the point that many of us, refer to ourselves as free. But if I was to ask you, what is your legal name? What name would you give it? Would you give me William, Smith, Jones, and Johnson? Because if so, you're not free. Those names don't belong to you. Those are not slave names, those are European names. Those are names that belong to the European nations. And if you hold their names, you hold their ideals. If you hold their ideals, you hold their allegiance. Islam? All right? So there's no way simultaneously in the same thought you can hold, allegiance to the European nations and honor your forefathers. It's literally impossible. Right? Because one thought is antithetical to the next. Right? And it'll cause that confusion in the mind that has our people acting out the madness that we act out daily. Right? Because we know we're something greater, but we're living like servants, paupers. We know we come from a royal seed bloodline, right? We even slip in, peace, king. What's going on, queen? Those aren't even our titles. King and queen are British royal titles. You weren't kings and queens. You were sultans, sultanas, mansas, amirs, walis. This is what you were. You weren't kings and queens, right? But because we're dealing with ones that we know that haven't studied, that we let it go, right? But brother, have you considered? Sister, have you considered? Right? So the goal is to get our people to think. Because our prophet said, if I can get you to thinking, you'll save yourself. Right? And how many people in here think it would be a good idea, right, to be a part of a movement that inspired people to think for themselves? Could you raise your hand by showing hands? That'd be a good thing to have, right? In fact, that's something that we need, right? And the institutions that we have that do that, we should give them our fullest support. And we should go tell people about it. We should call people to it, right? Last thought from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, passed form, or I would say died, in 632 AD, right? By the year 711, Islam has swept all across northern Africa. Not conquering, not killing, right? But uniting tribes and pushing the Roman nations who had been there for about 1,000 years out. By the time we get to Morocco, right, in the early 7s, right? By the time Islam gets there, it organizes and invades Spain in 711 AD and ruled Spain for 781 years. Islam? Now from 632 to 711 AD, that's like 80-something years, right? Prophet Noble Drew Ali has been going on 80-something years, right? And we weren't able to do what our forefathers did in the same amount of time, which goes to show the damage and the condition that we're in. Because our forefathers, right, who were in northern Africa, who, like General Tariq, who was the general that invaded Spain, right? This brother right here was already, he was Amazigh, he was from northern Africa, right? When Grand Governor Musa ibn Nasser came in and met with General Tariq and they organized and, generated that confederation, when he talked to him, I said, well, this makes sense. I'll organize my people with this and we'll go in and we'll take the fight to them. And we ran in Spain, and there's a whole science behind that, how that happened. But when we went in there, the people that were there under the tyrant rule that they were under almost welcomed the Moors in. Right? Because it was known that the Moors represented civilization, which they didn't have. Right? So your turbans and your fezzes and all your royal garments, right? And the olive hue, which the European nations can't get, is supposed to represent cultivation, honor, integrity, civilization, and countless years of truth. Right? But it's not representing that now, is it? It's become a blight in humanity. Right? So we must uplift ourselves from the unwholesome depths and be ourselves and no one else. Islam?
Islam.
Come and support the Moorish Science Temple of America. Bring your friends and family members out, because it makes no sense if you're awake or you're woke and your mama's asleep. Because when Thanksgiving comes and when Christmas comes, guess what it's going to be? Christmas trees and turkey and ham hocks, right?
Right.
So we got work to do. All right, family? Everyone please rise. We'll close as we began in prayer. Please hold your feet at a 45-degree angle, standing on your square, and the heels will be touching like this. Raise 5 fingers on your left, 2 fingers on your right. Invoking the sacred presence of the seventh Elohim that created everything that ever was, is, or evermore to be. For our visitors, please adopt a position of prayer that is comfortable for you in giving homage to our collective creator. Please repeat after me. Allah,
Allah,
the Father of the universe,
Father of the universe,
the Father of love,
Father of love,
truth,
truth,
peace,
peace,
freedom,
freedom,
and justice.
and justice.
Allah is my protector,
Allah is my protector,
my guide,
my guide,
and my salvation.
and my salvation.
By night, and by day.
and by day.
Through his holy prophet,
Through his holy prophet,
Drew Ali.
Drew Ali.
Amen.
Amen.
Islam, boys.
الله أكبر حي على الصلاة